We are back on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk, 1180, 1230 KGEO, 1410 KERI, 1000 KKIM, and now on the Internet 3 times a week nationwide on knookmedia.com. Our guest by phone is former Congressman John Leboutillier, who has a great program I highly recommend, Political Insiders on Fox. So, John, we were talking a little bit about the VA and
Obamacare.
And it is an outrage. What's going to happen here? I mean, here it is. He says we're going to get to the bottom of this. We were actually at the bottom of this already. But yet, whenever we have these scandals, nobody gets fired. There's no responsibility. What's going to happen here? What's the end game here?
Good question. Ultimately, I don't think that much is going to get fixed at the time being. I think that everyone agrees it's a disgrace, but no one in the leadership of either the Republican or Democratic Party is going to do much to really change it. When they're talking about getting rid of General Shinseki as if that's going to solve the problem, it's ridiculous. That guy's not the problem. He's actually a good person. It's the system is the problem. I got an email from a guy who left the service in 1963. And the day before he left the service, the guy doing his paperwork said to him, listen, you're entitled to health care from the VA, but you really shouldn't use it unless you're at death's doorstep. And if you are at death's doorstep, the VA will open the door for you. So back then, it was no good. And it's now 51 years later. And they are having veterans die left and right for lack of adequate care.
It wasn't the door
this is going to require a big change in the way the government runs this thing, or else the government shouldn't run it. And privatize the whole thing and let every veteran have insurance in the private health system. That's the way to do it.
Well, it wasn't the door they were going to open, it was the coffin.
Oh,
yeah. Sadly.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true.
This president knows nothing unless it's on the news. What kind of leader is he? And yet he turns around, and I just heard on the news the other day, he's got this agreement with Iran, and when he thinks it's so positive, now he says, my administration, because of my work. He doesn't take credit unless he thinks it's a real positive for him.
That's right. Same thing he did for the takedown of bin Laden.
Yeah, was he even there?
No, but it was always my administration. The military answered to me. It's always me, I.
How about Fast and Furious, IRS scandal, NAS, Benghazi, Obamacare, Common Core?
Nothing.
Yeah, I know nothing. I'm Private Schultz or Sergeant Schultz.
Sergeant Schultz.
I know nothing.
That's actually a pretty decent. That's a pretty decent segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about with you, and that's Benghazi and the Select Committee. And it's funny because I've heard you mention this before. Last time we talked about this, you said that it'd be great if the Republicans could get a backbone, but apparently they finally have a backbone. I mean, why did they wait this long, and why now for the Select Committee? I think it's a great idea, but why now? What happened? I
don't know why it took so long. I was asked by Frank Wolf, who's a congressman from Virginia, who spearheaded the effort. He got 180 members of Congress to sign on to a Select Committee, 180 Republican members of Congress, and still Boehner wouldn't do it. All last fall, Frank Wolf asked me to round up former members of Congress to go after Boehner, which we did, and put pressure on him. And he never would do it until the last round of emails that were secretly held in the White House came out from a lawsuit brought by Judicial Watch, and that sort of turned the tide. And he had to do it, so he finally did it. And the committee's been formed, and will start pretty soon. And Pelosi decided to put 5 Democrats on there, and so I read she did it to protect Hillary, because the Democrats are worried that when the truth comes out about all the Benghazi stuff, it's going to further erode Hillary's support, as it did a year ago when stuff came out and she had her little outburst. What difference at this point does it make? A line that will haunt her if she runs for president.
And should.
As it should. Yeah, as it should.
Yeah, oh yeah.
We're
Yeah.
having a conversation with former Congressman John Leboutillier. You know, another question I had in that same line is, and you'd made this comment on the air with us before, John, is you think nothing was done in the past because the administration had something on Boehner. But you know, in the campaign in 2008, Hillary made a big deal about, you know, who do you want to have answer the phone at 3:00 in the morning? Well, she got that 3:00 in the morning call and hasn't done anything. I mean, where was the Secretary of State in this whole thing?
Where was the president?
Yeah.
Well, but then again, the Secretary of State really is the person that has the direct responsibility for this, reporting to the president, and Hillary's getting a pass on this so far. You know, people are questioning.
Her first round of malfeasance in this deal is not that night at 3 a.m. It's several months before, all the way back to the spring of 2012. Her security people, State Department security people in Libya, are cabling back, we need to send more security people over here to Libya, and we cannot withdraw the security people that are scheduled to go back to Washington. Those requests were repeatedly ignored, and some security people were pulled out of Libya in the spring and summer leading up to the incident, which happened, as we know, on 9/11. 2012. So Hillary needs to answer, and I know that the Secretary of State does not sit there checking off and reading every cable about how many security personnel are in every embassy around the world. But it's the same thing we talked about before the commercial. She's in charge of the State Department. Whether she actually reads a cable or not, the decision whether to deploy security people or not ultimately goes out under her name. The cables are all signed by the Secretary of State. So she needs, if she knows how to run anything, she needs to make sure the decisions are made are the right ones. You can't just defer things to people and expect that the problem is solved. I mean, in her case, she's incompetent at running things. I'm here in New York. She was a senator here, as we all unfortunately know, for 8 years. She ran the worst office anybody ever saw. Yeah, you went to the Hillary Clinton Senate office to get her to come speak at an event or get a problem solved. It was a mess of confusion and bad organization. Her campaign in 2008 for president was a disaster. The woman can't run anything.
You know,
and that's going to come out during these hearings.
Well, Kerry is scheduled to testify on June 12th, but I would wonder, why is he...
Different committee, though. Different committee. It's the Government Operations Committee. They really should not have him come to that committee.
That's what I'm getting at.
It's been taken out of there. Darrell Issa is a disaster as the chairman of that committee. That's why Boehner finally decided to get it out of there and create the select committee, because ISIS so screwed up all these investigations, including the IRS one.
Here's a question for you. Maybe you can answer, and I want a real positive view on this. I keep hearing that people want to vote for Hillary because look at what she's done. I've yet to figure out what she's done. Can you help us?
She married Bill.
That's a positive
like
thing?
She said one time about her old boyfriend, if I'd have married him, he would have been president.
Yeah, but he wouldn't have been. Bill Clinton, though, is a talented, competent political figure, and she is not a good... I do this show on Fox with Doug Schoen, who was the pollster for Bill Clinton, and he knows Hillary, and he said to me, she has no political sense at all. None. She even knows that she has no political sense. Now, you guys tell me, how can you be president of the United States, which is ultimately the most political job of them all? How can you have that job and do it well if you don't have any political sense?
Well, I think the current occupant of that room doesn't have a lot of political sense, and I think his thin skin is starting to show.
What kind of job is he doing?
Yeah, not doing a very good job. I think you had mentioned this on the air a couple of weeks ago, and I have to agree with it, and it's a sad commentary. With this Benghazi Select Committee, no Democrats stood up and said, hey, we need to have this. When Watergate was going on, I remember Republicans standing up saying, we have to have There's an issue here we have to look at that's greater than politics. Yet nobody in the Democratic Party has done that, and that's sad. It really, really
They
is.
got to defend their president.
It is sad because they put party above country. And, listen, if Hillary didn't do anything really wrong, if everything is going to come out as good, why are they complaining about these investigations? What are they worried about?
Yeah, exactly.
Having another look at this problem where 4 Americans died and all. Well, what the hell's wrong with it?
Yeah, there should be a problem at all. John, unfortunately, that's it for us. Next time we have you back, I'd like to have you on for the full hour because I think the three of us could there's a lot of subjects we can cover.
You set it up, and I will be there.
John, it's always a pleasure to have you on.
All right, Marty and Clay, thanks both of you, and we'll talk soon.
See you on the TV.
Take care. We'll be back in a couple
bye-bye.
seconds on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio News Talk 1180, and our guest will be Rick Santorum.